Hello, and welcome to DIACC's Profiles in Identity Leadership series. I'm Joni Brennan, and I'm the president of the DIACC. And today it's my pleasure to talk to Ken McMillan. Ken is the Government of Canada Treasury Board Secretariat Acting Director of Digital Identity. And he is also the co-chair of our Trust Framework Expert Committee. Welcome, Ken. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Joni. Very nice to be here.
Where do you see Canada as taking a lead or having the opportunity to take a lead when you're looking around at the other identity initiatives that are happening around the world?
I think that we have, by virtue of the way we're formed, we have the benefit of second, third, and fourth opinions because we don't vest all the influence and all the decision making in the federal government. We kind of have to get good at compromise. If we can't compromise in terms of how we design the system, and we don't design a system that interoperates, then we're not going to get anywhere. So in a sense, not being a single state that has this, kind of unitary approach that says, well, we're going to do all these things together, instead, that says that we have to collaborate, that we have to compromise, it puts us in a good position. So that's something that Canada can bring to the table. And it's interesting, when we were talking to our European colleagues very recently, they observed that they hadn't expected how many parallels there would be between the European Union and some of the challenges of getting different nations to agree on approaches and standards. And they hadn't necessarily seen those analogies within Canada, but there are a lot of shared perspectives there. And it's interesting because it means we can't embark on this single path. We have to figure out how to work on this together. And we have to figure out how, when different decisions are made, how we can make all those different approaches work together.
Could you tell us a little bit about what insights you've learned and shared?
There are a lot of areas where the public sector has to really take a back seat. And some of those areas would be where there is a capacity for testing liveness. So do we know if this person is who she really says she is? Well, if we can attach some of those attributes that come by virtue of her banking or her movements relative to her internet service provider or cell phone provider, all of that information really feeds into an understanding of whether her asserted identity is who she really is. And then the other part of that is, what do we know fundamentally about her? What's their foundation? Well, if she was born in Canada, then she has some birth documentation. If she came to Canada as an immigrant, then she has initial documentation from Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. And that forms that initial identity piece that then we really need to complement with the data that's available in the private sector in terms of having a liveness, having a validation of identity that really reflects currency, as opposed to once a year filing your taxes or whatever else, every 5 years or every 10 years removing your driver's license. That's not the same kind of touch point. So we really benefit from having those opinions at the table in the Trust Framework Expert Committee and being able to talk about how we make these systems work together.
Do you have any advice that you'd like to share with others, people or organizations who are thinking about investing in identity, adopting identity solutions, or maybe even becoming members of the DIACC community?
Thank you, Joni. It's been my pleasure to cooperate and participate with DIACC and with the Identity North work for the past few years. And I have really benefited from it tremendously. The genesis of that work for me was knowing that we had to build a system at the time that was going to be agnostic. It was going to use a lot of different ways of demonstrating a state, and they were all going to work. And in this case, it was just a pure authentication, just like a username, password with a key, login. We're not necessarily attaching identity to it. But that grew into an appreciation for some of the complexities of the problem. And what I really enjoyed about DIACC is the amount of learning that takes place. I like the idea that wherever I go, I'm going to be surrounded with people who know a lot of things that I want to know, that I can learn from. And I really find that at DIACC. It brings a lot of different opinions. People do, it's not invariably true, but people tend to recognize that there is a stipulation that, we stay away from the sales pitch elements of this, and we just talk about what we know. and what we're learning, and demonstrate the humility about the things that we don't know. So all those things, certainly I can say that I've derived from DIACC and the DIACC relationships, and I really value them.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today, Ken, and thank you for your openness and your willingness, as well as your time and your commitment to serve as the co-chair for the Trust Framework Expert Committee, especially to help deliver the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework to deliver value to all Canadians. Thanks.
Thank you, Joni. And it's my pleasure to do this job. It's a lot of fun. There's so much change taking place. There's so many opportunities to make things better. I feel very fortunate to be in this role and to be working with the people I'm working with.